So we want to create a chat app, and we have a backend that has two methods: one to get the messages and one for sending any message. Okay. And we build our chat app in this way. We will have a component for the chat app. We'll have a component for the message list, and we'll have a component for the message input. Okay? Now let's start with the message list. And let's start with the message list. Okay, components. So chat app. Okay. Do you see there? Function chat app. And we're going to return here our message list and our our message input. I will start prettier. I don't know why code spaces never keeps my, but I will start prettier and I will configure it to be the default format. So that way every time I save, it will reformat it and it will make it look pretty. Okay, so I have my chat app. My chat app will have a message list and a message input. Just that. Now let's build questions so far. Okay, all good? Now for the message, by the way, follow.
Is this like a div that you're putting in with the two little?
Oh, it's not a div, it's actually a fragment. So a fragment is, remember when you're returning JSX, you can return a single node, right? You cannot return two elements. You can return a single parent node. So this is to avoid putting a div.
Okay.
Because a div will add an actual div to the page, but I don't want to add a div. And this is what we call a React fragment. A fragment is a way to put several nodes in a single node, right?
Right.
Having a single parent. But it doesn't add anything to the HTML, the resulting HTML. It's just nothing. Got it. So questions so far. We have a message list component and a message input component. Okay? Now let's create those two components. Message list. Now this won't have anything yet. And let's create the message input. Of course, I need to import them. Okay, so this is my app, very simple. I have a chat app component, and that chat app component has two more components, the message list and the message input. Of course, I would need to add it to the index so I can see it on my page, chat app. So when I run it, let me open the terminal. There you go. It's not pretty, okay? It's just there. Questions? Questions? So chat app, message list, message input.
Message list.
It has nothing in it, not yet. Just a div that says messages.
Let me see your index name.
Oh, my index is the page, and it's just the chat app.
Contain the chat
Oh, yeah.
app and contain.
Yeah.
Okay, alright, yeah, because we're not gonna list the incidents.
Questions? No? Okay, so let's work on the message list. Now, the first thing that we need to provide here, remember, is the function to query for the messages. Okay? And if you remember correctly, we said that we're going to create a function to get messages and a function to post messages. In this case, we need the function to get messages. Okay? And it will be an asynchronous function. Now, these functions, remember, we will create a folder. We can call it services. You can call it services, APIs, anyway, but services is pretty common. And let's create it here, get messages. Sport function, get messages. Oh, a sync function. Yes. Yeah, because
JSX.
it doesn't have GSX in it.
Oh, it's just a JavaScript.
It's just a JavaScript function. If it's a React component, you put GSX. If it's not, then just yes,
It's a script.
just JavaScript. Now we are consuming our API here. Fetch, and we have to specify the URL. Okay, so the URL for this particular service, let me see if I can, and I have to remember to keep restarting the code space because every time.
Are we using OpenAI? What are we using for?
For the server, this is just me. Don't worry about you. I'm just creating this server so you have a server to connect to.
Oh, this is the NG.
So you will connect to my server. Your app will be connected.
Rock thing?
Sorry?
The NG rock or whatever?
No. I will have to use code spaces. So that's what I'm running here. I'm running a code space that has a server for a chat app.
Okay.
And your app and my app, my chat app, is a client, will connect to that server. But you don't need a server. I already have one.
You'll be the-
I will be the server. Okay, so this is the message. Okay, this is the URL. I will try to keep it okay, this is the URL. And let's see if I can share it with you on Slack. Okay, that's the URL. And this is my function to get the message. I'm doing a fetch request. Oh wait, I need a wait. I'm making a get request to that URL with fetch. I'm getting the response, and from the response, I'm getting the JSON. And that's the data that I'm returning. Okay? So that's my get messages function. Questions about the get message function?
That response is a promise?
That response is no, this here is not a promise because I'm using a wait.
Oh.
Because I'm using a wait, then this is the actual response.
Yeah.
I can only use a wait here because this is an asynchronous function. So get messages is an asynchronous function. I'm just switching from time to time to this code spaces so it doesn't stop. Okay. Better there?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Got it? Okay, so we have the function to get the messages. Now, in our message list, there is several ways where we can get the messages. We can create, and I want to give you the long version and the inefficient, not efficient version, and then we can find a more efficient version, right? So one version is to create a state with the messages, right? By the way, don't do this because you will delete it after. So just follow this with me. So I will create a state that has all the messages. This state will be empty. And then I will use an effect. So this effect will be executed just one time. And what I'm going to do here is to call get messages. And after I get the messages, I can call set messages. So with the data that I'm getting as a response, I'm going to set that as the messages. And this effect will only be executed one time after the component renders, right? So now here, I can basically iterate over that messages or map and make, let's do a div. And I will put message.message. Let's call it item. Now what we're missing here, the key, right? Key. And I think we're missing the author. Let's use B. Okay, so this is my app. Let's see if my app is running. Failed to fetch. Interesting. Failed to fetch. It's not running. Oh, I need to make a oh, it's public, so okay, it's right there. Let's see why it's not working. Let's see the request. Course requests. Of course. Wait, it's returning. Oh, I see what's happening. No, sorry. So when you're making a request from a server that is not the original server, it has to have some security settings that I didn't set in this thing over here, and how do I change that to work? We will have to ask ChatGPT. Let's do it. ChatGPT. How to add course allow all to a Flash app. Okay, let's see. So we need to install. Okay, we need to do this. And do this. Okay, let's do it again. Okay, it's working. Let's see, the port is public. The port is public. So this works. Perfect. And let's see if our app works now. Yeah, it works. Good. Now it's working. So you see, I'm making the request here in this section over here. Actually, let me messages. Okay, let me run the app again. So I'm running the app. The effect is running. Remember, the effect runs 2 times the first time. And every time I run the effect, I send that request to that URL and I get a 200 success response. And if I check the preview is essentially an empty array. Okay. Now I will try to send manually a message and see if my app responds. And I think I have it here. Yes. Oh, it's author, not user. Author. Okay, let me send this request manually. Okay, so now I have a message in the server, but notice that my app is not updated, right? Because remember, it only works the first time that it renders. That's the message, right? So it's getting the messages from the server, yes, but it's not refreshing every 10 seconds, so I will have to implement that, right? And it's a lot of code. And I cannot know if it's loading or not. So there is a lot of state or handling of this query for a real world application that I will have to implement. So I will have to implement a state for storing the data, the effect to get the data, and also a timeout. So every 10 seconds or so, it will also request the data again. So that's a lot of work, and that's a lot of code, right? We don't want to deal with that. So how can we simplify all this? And that's when React Query comes in handy. So React Query is this little library here that we can install, and we will use it to basically provide that functionality for us. Now, there is a process to install it using npm install, and there is a process to configure it because we need to have a client, but we will do that right now. So the first step to install React Query is to basically install it, right? So we go to a project, and we stop the terminal, and in the terminal we do npm install --save, and that's the name of the library. Add tanstack/React Query. That's the first step. So this is what we're going to install. Tanstack React Query. So npm install dash save timestat React query. Okay? Let me know when you have it installed. I'm just, when you see me switching to the chat app, I'm just trying to keep the app active so it doesn't stop. So I will eventually click it a little bit from time to time. Okay, so first step, install React query. And that's the dependency that we need to install. All good? Everybody? Sorry? Oh. React query. Okay, so that's the first step. Now the second step is to configure it. If you see the documentation, it says that we need to create a query client and to wrap our whole application in that query client provider. Remember the context that we learned in the last class? This is like a context, right? But for React query. So we need to go to our app component, and we have an app component in our app. You check is this underscore app, that's our app component. And right there we need to do that. So we need to wrap into the query client provider. Query client. Like this. Query client provider. Now this query client we have to create, and we will create it here. Query client equals new query client. And that's how we configure it to work in our app. So we have to go to the underscore app component, and we have to do it right there. Now I will share this code with you, so if you get any, so it will be easier. Just copy that section, replace your app component. So that means that anything inside our app can use React query, correct? But to be able to use React query, we need to add this context, this provider. By the way, one of the benefits of React query is that it also provides caching. So sometimes when you go, for example, when you go to one page and you go back to that page, the data is already there, it's already cached, right? So we can save even requests, because sometimes the data is cached. We don't have to query again, and your app will look faster. Okay, that's the first step. Let me go back here. Cool, everybody? All good? Cool. Now, notice that my app still works the same way. If I run dev now, nothing changed, right? Nothing changed because my component's still using that effect that we created before. Now, the point is to remove that effect and remove that state with a query, with a React query. So let's do that. Let's go to the message list, and instead of having all this code over here, we can say, okay, I want the messages use query. Notice that I automatically imported. And there is two things that we need to provide here. One is the query key. The query key is an array, in this case, array with the word messages, and a query function. And you know what the query function is?
Fetch.
No. We have the function. What's the name of the function? Get messages.
No.
Get messages. And that's it. That's my query. That's why we created that get messages. Is because use query or from React query already takes that function, and it will provide all the other benefits for us, right? Now the The query key is like the caching key. That means that I can, from a different component, invalidate. If I invalidate that caching key, that means that the query will get automatically executed again. So that's a benefit of using this type of. But again, we need to provide the query key. And the query key is always an array with a word or several words inside. In this case, messages, because we are querying messages. Let me just make sure that the chat app is not stopped. Now, we don't need the fed and we don't need the state anymore. We have our messages right here. Now, these messages, and by the way, we can also provide other options like initial data, an empty array, but again, it's up to you. Now, we can do messages dot data, and now I'll put something in JavaScript that we haven't used before, and it's this question mark. So instead of messages, messages is an object that has a lot of properties inside. One of those properties is data. The problem with data is that the first time that your component renders, that data is undefined. Because of course, I'm making a query, but that query hasn't returned any data yet. So that initial data is undefined, it's empty. So that's why we use this question mark. That question mark is essentially a way to shortcut the thing that comes after. That means that if it's undefined, nothing will be executed after. So that map will not be executed. That means it's like a short circuit there. Now, when the server responds and we have the data, then it will have that data. Okay? So now my app oh, don't tell me that it's saying is stop. Okay, it's working. Okay. Oh, there's an error. Oh, wait, here. No, it's not here. It should be here. Syntax error. All right, let's see now. What now? Wait, there is an error somewhere. Let's see if I can find it. Give me a second. Oh yeah, there was no error. It's just the browser, the server was messing. Okay, let me make sure that the chat app is not stopped, and here we are. So I guess this is not actually needed. Let me put this back. Sorry, give me 1 second. Oh wait, I messed it up. Sorry. There you go. Okay, so yeah, the question mark basically stops the execution whatever comes after if data is undefined, right? So data is the data that we get from the server, from that query, right? So whatever get messages returned, that will be data. Okay? Now, the nice thing about it is that every time I go back to my web page, the request is getting refreshed. And you can notice if I make another request, like I will make another, so author using React query. So I will make this request now from the terminal. And notice that as soon as I go back to my page, oh, I don't have the auto refresh, sorry. Refresh. Refresh on Windows focus, true. That means that every time my application gets the focus, it will refresh the page, right? And I can say refresh interval, and I can put, I don't know, 10, well, what is this value for? Milliseconds. So every 3 seconds, that will be, no, every 2 seconds. So now my app is refreshing every 2 seconds. And you can see in the network, you see the network tab, every 2 seconds is making the request automatically. And if the data is changed, the message will show up automatically there, right? So if I can go to the terminal and say, okay, John is sending a new message now, and he will say, what's up? Nice that you get the reference. So now you see that it will show up immediately there, right? I don't have to do anything, it's just there. And that's the React query doing its job, right? Every 2 seconds is refetching, and every time your application gets the focus, because for example, if your refresh is every 10 seconds, right? And if you go back to your application before those 10 seconds pass, you can still get a revalidation of the data because you have the refresh on Windows focus. That's true. That means that, actually let's do that because 2 seconds, every 2 seconds is very fast, right? So every 10 seconds, I will get all the new messages. Actually, let's do it 5. Okay? And that's all I need for my message list. Just connected to the backend. But notice that I need the get message function to be able to get the data. And the message function, oops. From here, I'm just using that as the function to query the information. Now messages have a bunch of all the data that we can use. Let me use another messages dot, you see, is loading error, failure count, failure reason, is stale. So is loading is essentially every time we are loading the information, that will be true. So let's put like a loading spinner here, or like a 3 dots. Oh, you saw the 3 dots, right? So it's loading, and then it hides because it's not loading anymore. Now is refetching. Let's do this. Is refetching. So every time it's refetching, those 3 dots will show up on the top. So that's a visual clue. I mean, it doesn't have to be that, it could be a spinner somewhere, right? And actually, you will see a lot of apps that do this. It's like they will show a spinner indicating the user that something is happening, right? But it's automatically handled for us. We don't have to create a state for the spinner. We don't have to do anything extra. It's just there. We can just use it, right? Of course, it's very annoying in this app, so I would remove it. But you get the point. It's like okay. Questions about the use query? All applications, I would say 99% of all applications that we build today use query. Because, I mean, there is use query, and actually there is another library that kind of does the same. I think it's called SWR. Yeah. So SWR is exactly like use query, except that SWR is built by the same team that built Nest.js. It's good, but people prefer React query still. And we will see the other option of React query, and is the mutations. What is the mutations? Mutations. Okay. So questions about? No questions? Okay, let's do now the input. So this is the message list, but again, we have also an input. Okay. Now for the input, we can technically create a, like a form, but I think it will be an overkill here. So I will just create a state for the message, set message. So this is to create my input, right? State, empty string. Value, message, unchange, set message. Okay, so with this we have an input that actually has I can store the data, right? Now I will also need like a button maybe. Okay, a button to send a message. Okay, so now when I write hello and I send, it will send that to the server. Okay? Make sense? So I have a state that holds the state of that input. Remember, the only way that we can create that input is using a state, like in this case, or using React Hook form. Now, React Hook form for a single input is too much, right? It's not needed for one single input. We will use a state and a button to actually send the data. So on click, handle, send. Handle, send. And we need to send the information here. Okay? Now, same way that we have a get message, we also need a function to post a message. We talked about this in the previously, right? So we have get message. Let me see if I can find it. Here we are. The same way we have get messages as a function, we also have a function to post a message. And that function takes a parameter, the message that we want to send. It might take actually two, the message and the author, right? Because that's what the message is, the message and the author. And then we send a fetch request. And notice that we don't care much about the response of this fetch request, We only need to send the request. That's it. Okay? Now, let's create this function. So we go to services and we say new file, post message. Support function, post, async function, post message. So we need a message and we need the author. And what we're doing is fetch. Now the URL I have to copy from get messages. And the method, what is the method? Post. We need a header. Yes. Content type. And this header, we need it because we are going to send JSON. And we need the body. JSON, stringify, message, author. And that's our request. Okay? So it's a function, it's an asynchronous function. It takes a message and an author, and it sends a fetch request to that URL as a post request, content type application JSON. That means that the server, I'm telling the server I'm sending you JSON, and the JSON that I'm sending has message and author in an object. Okay? Okay? Now, to use this function, we're going to use a use mutation. And this is another hook from React Query. Use mutation takes a mutation function, and the mutation function is post message. Oh, by the way, I made a mistake here. So post message cannot take more than one parameter. That's the only restriction that this mutation has. So I will send this like this. I will assume that this is a message object. Internally should have the message and the author, right? So when I'm calling post message, what I'm doing is instead of sending two strings, I'm sending an object that has the two strings inside, right? One single parameter. That's the only restriction with mutations. The mutation has to be a function with a single parameter. That's all. So that's what I'm changing post message, to have a single parameter, and that parameter is the whole message, right? So an example of a message will be something like this. Message, hello, author, Mary. That's what a message would be. The whole body, the whole payload. Okay? Now in my mutation here, oh, it cannot be message. It has to be, let's call it post. When I want to use the mutation, I can do post.mutate, and I can send that message, right? So I will send message, and the author will be, in my case, Ernesto. And that's all I'm going to do. Okay? Well, I should do something else, and it's to, once I send the message, I want to force the query to revalidate, so my message will show on the screen. Now, the other thing I will do here is to set the message as an empty string. So I'm cleaning the message input, I'm saying. Okay, let's see if that works. Hello, MDC5, 25. When I'm sending this, I will send the request, and I will clear the area, right, the input. Now, what will happen is that the message will not show up immediately on the top. Why? Because remember, the is every 5 seconds, right? But after 5 seconds or less, I should see it there. Actually, it didn't. Where is my... Something failed.
Did you start your server?
Oh, post message is not defined. It's because I didn't import it. Of course. Cool, now it should work. Let's see. Hello, MDC 25. There you go. Okay. Now, of course, we can make it show immediately, right? The way we do it is to, so get messages, sorry, message list is using a query with this key. What we can do is to force that this key gets revalidated. And for that, we need to use query invalidator on success, query client, invalidate queries, messages. There you go. So now it's more what I want. So let's do it. Hello again. See, now it's immediate because I'm sending the result. I'm waiting for the response to see it, and once it succeeds, I'm saying revalidate the messages key, and that forces the message to be reloaded again. Okay, so that's how we use. I mean, it seems a lot, but believe me, this is what every application is using. So we need to use it in your applications. The other thing is that if you try to implement this using fetch, well, you're using fetch, but if you try to do it using useFetch and state, it will be too much, right? And these functions are essentially handling everything for you. Like, for example, this one is just one single hook that has everything in it, and the message input is sending the data. So this is the mutation. This is the payload that I'm sending, right? And what happens is that after this succeeds, I'm invalidating the messages and then setting the input to empty. Okay? So, okay, 40 minutes. So I will share this to, by the way, let me stop this.